When Case Closed debuted on Cartoon Network back in 2004 as part of its Adult Swim programming block, it was best described as a strangely compelling detective cartoon. I vividly remember the inquisitive and highly popular Jimmy Kudo, who aspired to be the next Sherlock Holmes. There was no reason not to be fascinated by this mystery epic, which featured a genius teen detective who was poisoned, shrank into a child's body, and assumed a new identity to do what he does best, and that's solving complex crime cases. While Case Closed felt American and syndicated, there's no denying that it was the English localization of Detective Conan, the long-running Japanese manga series written and illustrated by Gosho Aoyama. The Japanese original, which debuted back in 1996, is still actively airing new episodes, having produced over 1,000 of them and comfortably exceeding 100 manga volumes. Dang. Now, to those of you who are wondering what exactly Funimation did, well, in simple terms, it basically Americanized the show. While Funimation heavily localized a lot of the elements, like character names and even the setting, it simply stopped dubbing after 130 episodes. Truth be told, that's just about a tenth of the whole story that exists in Japan. See, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the Jimmy Kudo you knew was actually an entirely different person with a different name, living in a completely different country in the middle of an unfinished story. So once you learn how much had to be rebuilt to get the show on American TV, you have to wonder what else was left behind. Well, that brings me to the main point of today's video, where we're going to be taking a quick look at 15 differences between the American and Japanese versions. This is Case Closed versus Detective Conan, and it's going to be a good one, so let's get right into it. The title itself is a localization. In case you didn't know, the iconic anime TV series is called Meitante Conan, or Great Detective Conan, in Japan. Believe it or not, when Gosho Aoyama's hit manga series was introduced to North America by Funimation, it faced an unforeseen legal roadblock in the form of Conan the Barbarian. I wish I was joking, but it's true. You see, Robert E. Howard's famous fantasy character was actively trademarked in the US by Conan Properties International, and although our detective shares virtually nothing, I repeat, nothing in common with the sword-wielding brawny Cimmerian, U.S. trademark law is fiercely protective of its brand names, particularly within overlapping media and entertainment categories. Fearing an expensive lawsuit for trademark infringement over the name Conan, Funimation's legal team decided to rebrand the series for the Western market. As a result, the series was renamed Case Closed, and the titular hero's name was changed to Conan Edogawa, while keeping the show's official title legally clear. Like it or not, the Barbarian's lawyers held priority rights to the trademarked name in American pop culture, so one of Japan's most iconic detectives was left with no other option but to operate under a completely different title in the US. Almost every character got a new name. First things first, every character getting a new name is under no circumstances a minor dub modification. It's more like a full rebranding of the entire cast's identity. Let's take a look at some examples. Shinichi Kudo was localized to Jimmy Kudo, Ran Mori became Rachel Moore, Kogoro Mori became Richard Moore, Ai Haibata became Anita Haley, Ayumi Yoshida became Amy Yeager, Sonoko Suzuki became Serena Sebastian, and Heiji Hattori became Harley Hartwell. Well, if this isn't a classic case of a complete identity overhaul, I don't know what is. Nearly all of the characters, be they major or minor, were given new westernized names that Funimation later admitted had no deeper meaning or any kind of thematic symbolism. The newly invented names were simply generic English names to make Case Closed more palatable for US TV standards in the early 2000s. But of course, having said that, Conan Edogawa's alias was kept intact.
My name is Conan Edogawa.
You see, the name Conan was directly inspired by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the famous Sherlock Holmes author, and as for Edogawa, it was inspired by Japanese mystery writer Edogawa Ranpo. Furthermore, because Conan already sounded familiar to the US audience, Funimation left that name untouched while systematically westernizing the entire cast around him. Japan itself was edited out of the setting. If you've watched Funimation's Case Closed, you'll agree when I say the localization went well beyond simply renaming characters. Funimation transplanted the entire setting from Japan to a vaguely defined North America. This strategy resulted in a rather surreal viewing experience filled with constant contradictions between what the viewer saw on screen and what they heard in the English dub.
For Austin was murdered! Those who were killed.
While the dub insisted that the plot was set in North America, the visual animation said otherwise. Case Closed featured Japanese storefronts covered in kanji, yen banknotes, traditional bento boxes, and even architecture that was uniquely native to Japan. The visuals were an inevitable, incessant conflict between sight and sound.
With Susanna.
In fact, what surprised me in particular was Osaka being referred to as Alberta, and if I'm being honest, that took me right out of it because the animation clearly told one story, whereas the dialogue desperately insisted on another. The opening theme was replaced with an original English song. One of the primary things Funimation did when it localized Detective Conan as Case Closed was replacing the original Japanese theme song. The original opening theme song for Detective Conan was Muni ga Doki Doki by the popular Japanese punk rock band known as the High Lows. Funimation replaced that song with an English vocal adaptation and renamed it First New Century. Sung by Carl Finch, the English song retained the original melody, but the lyrics were changed to English. Now, theme song replacements were a pretty common practice in American anime dubbing during the early 2000s. The whole point is to keep Western audiences engaged and keep the language barrier at bay. That said, we'd love to hear in the comments down below which version of the theme song you'd prefer. The American dub stopped telling the story after barely 10% of it. Despite Detective Conan being one of the longest-running and most popular anime franchises in television history, Funimation's Case Closed ended after covering only a fraction of the story. The Japanese original, which premiered back in 1996, has since produced over 1,000 episodes, as well as ongoing manga volumes. However, Funimation stopped production at 123 episodes, citing poor TV ratings and low DVD sales. This means that the English dub viewers saw roughly 10% of the narrative, and they were cut off before significant overarching plot developments unfolded. Many storylines were left completely unresolved, such as Ai Haibara's introduction, the mystery of the Black Organization, and Jimmy's quest for a permanent cure. Cartoon Network aired even less than Funimation dubbed. Believe it or not, out of the 130 episodes that Funimation eventually dubbed, including the multi-part specials, Adult Swim only aired 50 episodes. Well, it's no secret that the anime struggled majorly with the viewership. Also, if I may add, the time slots in particular, along with the episodic nature of the mystery format, made it impossible for the show to have a steady following that serialized action hits like Dragon Ball Z enjoyed on the same network. This brings me to the poor ratings, which eventually drove Cartoon Network to pull the plug after broadcasting just 50 episodes. As for the remaining unaired episodes, they would later run on the Funimation channel. The movie dubs were more faithful than the TV dub. When Funimation dubbed the first few Detective Conan feature films, such as Case Closed, The Time-Bombed Skyscraper, or Case Closed, The Phantom of Baker Street, these films took a noticeably more authentic approach to localization than the early TV episodes did. If you're wondering how the movies managed to do things in that manner, allow me to explain. You see, the movies made it clear that the story was set in Japan. The films not only retained references to Baker Ward, but also various other landmarks. Additionally, because there was cultural authenticity, the dialogue aligned perfectly, and more importantly, naturally, with the untouched visual animation. That being said, character names were still a point of compromise, and for the first 6 feature films, Funimation kept the localized core cast names of Jimmy Kudo, Richard Moore, and Rachel Moore. Intriguingly, this was not the case for the secondary characters. In any case, the point we're trying to make here is that the movie dubs not only respected the series' actual cultural background, they also maintained character continuity. And that's not all. The films also offered Western viewers a much more faithful and cohesive experience than the TV broadcast. The manga names don't even fully match the anime dub. It's safe to conclude that even the official American translation was unable to determine the characters' final identities, or in even simpler terms, who the characters were supposed to be by the end. When Viz Media began publishing the Case Closed manga, they aligned their translation with Funimation's TV dub with the sole goal of maintaining consistency for the fans. This means that the characters who were introduced early retained their generic Americanized character names. However, after Funimation stopped dubbing the anime, localizers had no more Americanized reference names to draw from. Rather than coming up with new Western names for the newly introduced characters, Viz Media shifted strategies. For all story arcs, events, and characters introduced after the dub's cancellation, Viz Media went back to using the original Japanese names. For example, Masumi Sera, Rei Furuya, and Subaru Okiya. This created quite the split in the official translation. Imagine a legacy core cast with early 2000s Americanized names coexisting with newer characters who retain their authentic Japanese identities. This one's pretty wild, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on it, so you know where to head, right? The villains kept their alcohol code names. Mostly. This is one of those exceptional cases where the localization contributed something extra that, mind you, wasn't there in the original version, while keeping the Japanese concept entirely intact. Remember how the Black organization members used iconic codenames based on alcohol? Specifically, I recall gin and vodka. Additionally, the manga also created invented real civilian names for gin and vodka, or more specifically, Melchior and Caspar, that don't exist in the Japanese original. The addition of made-up names for characters whose entire identity in the Japanese original depends on anonymity is a minor but somewhat strange piece of non-canonical lore that only exists because of the English dub. The dub accidentally fixed a plot hole the Japanese version never bothered to. When adapting the early chapters of Gosho Aoyama's manga, the Japanese anime production team made considerable changes to tone down organized crime elements and steer clear of complex serialized plot lines. Given that the original Japanese anime removed early references to the Black organization from its first season, this resulted in a major continuity error, with Conan recalling the names of gin and vodka despite never really knowing their codenames on screen. When Funimation localized the series, the dub viewers noticed this narrative gap. Funimation rather deftly added a clever continuity patch in the introductory episode of Harley Hartwell, or should I say, Eiji Hattori. After solving the murder mystery in this episode, Harley casually mentions to Conan that two men named Gin and Vodka had been asking around town about Jimmy Kudo. Thanks to this bit of dialogue, Conan had a logical origin point for learning the villains' code names. While the patch introduced a slight quirk of its own, implying Harley somehow stumbled upon secret Black organization operatives on his own, it successfully fixed a major plot fault that the original Japanese anime left unaddressed for years. Kogoro's drinking was softened, not removed. In Great Detective Conan, Kogoro Mori is defined by his vices. He's seen as someone who regularly gets wasted on beer or sake. The English dub retained Mori's drinking as a humorous trait, significantly toning things down from outright alcoholism towards a lighter, bumbling drunk portrayal in order to suit Western broadcast standards for children's and daytime programming. By keeping the drinking aspect, the dub kept the character's goofy demeanor intact, thereby presenting Richard Moore as a silly, overly dramatic, and buffoonish detective, one who enjoyed wine just a little too much. The murders stayed, but the broadcast version trimmed around them. When Funimation localized Case Closed, they created two different edits of the same episodes: an altered TV edit tailored for network standards, and a full, unedited, uncut version intended for home video. Airing on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block categorically meant that stuff like visual violence, blood splatter, and graphic murder scenes had to be digitally softened or trimmed so as to comply with broadcast requirements. I'm sure you can therefore imagine what happened when Funimation ended up making a major authoring mistake by releasing the censored cropped TV edit video masters instead of the fully uncensored footage on DVD box sets. As a result, fans who purchased these uncut season sets discovered that several episodes still contained noticeable broadcast edits, such as trimmed violent scenes, despite the packaging explicitly advertising the box sets as unedited. A brand new dub reversed almost everything Funimation did. In 2025, Netflix and Crunchyroll started streaming a new English dub produced by Studio Nano under the original title Detective Conan rather than Case Closed for the first time in the franchise's American history, restoring the original Japanese character names and setting instead of continuing Funimation's Americanized approach. This means that there are now effectively two parallel yet incompatible versions of the exact same episodes in circulation. One that's completely Americanized and has Jimmy Kudo living in North America, while the other purposefully restores the Japanese original. Of course, this creates a genuine state of canon confusion for new viewers trying to navigate the franchise's identity. Even the new, more faithful dub still quietly edits content. You might be surprised to learn that besides restoring original names along with the setting, the new dub still tones down certain language, replacing words like damn with darn. Of course, there's more. The dub also softens overt allusions to drugs. For example, there's a scene that specifically labels marijuana instead of just referring to it as only a drug. In another episode, a character's second language was changed from English to Spanish, keeping in mind the English-speaking dub audience. Add to this another sequence where two characters talking in English in the original were actually rewritten so that they could talk in Spanish instead. In a way, every English version of this franchise, whether old or new, has made conscious editorial choices. It's just that the new dub is busy making its own subtle edits, albeit smaller and sneakier. An 1,100 episode story versus a roughly 130 episode fragment. As of 2026, Detective Conan has passed its 30-year milestone, having broadcast over 1,100 episodes, dozens of feature films, and more than 100 published manga volumes. The original Funimation Case Closed dub only covers the first 123 episodes and the initial 6 films, which means that nearly 90% of the franchise is yet to receive an official English TV dub from that era. What English dub viewers have seen so far is just a small fragment of a story that in Japan has continued to unfold for 3 long decades. Therefore, it only makes sense to say that everything that viewers think they know about Case Closed is drawn from roughly 1/10 of the story that continues to exist to date. There's simply no denying that the original 2004 Funimation Case Closed TV dub exposed an entire generation of American viewers to Gosho Aoyama's mystery epic, offering Cartoon Network audiences a taste of a very different style of detective storytelling. I think it's safe to admit that Case Closed developed a substantial fan base, so much so that people are still watching, talking about it, and wondering why it never continued, even to this day. That said, it was also an extensively reconstructed piece of a much bigger, much more specifically Japanese story, one that was renamed, relocated, musically replaced, quietly re-edited, and eventually abandoned less than a third of the way through its first 100 episodes, whereas the original went on to become one of the longest-running anime and manga franchises ever created. And I hate to say it, but that pretty much brings us to the end of today's video. Now that we're here, though, I've got a question for all of you. Are you a bigger fan of Case Closed or Meitantei Conan? Which version do you personally prefer and why? Let us know in the comments section down below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like it. As for me, I'll be back with another video for you soon, so thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one.